Opening and reform. I look 40 years of China's opening and reform. I look back, remembering the changes. In 1981, I came here as a student. I became a lawyer and economist, working with China ever since. I advised foreign investors entering China and worked with the Chinese government, drafting the regulations that made it happen. In the 1990s, with globalization, I helped China reform state-owned enterprises, turning them into multinational corporations that would compete on the global stage. In the past decades, I advised on environmental policy that would help China become the world's leader on renewable energy. I have not just observed, but also participated in each stage of China's reform and opening. Now, it's time to tell the story of these past 40 years of reform and opening that has made China the global economy that it is today. It is not about looking back, but learning how we got here and looking toward the future that we will create together. Join me, Laurence Brahm, for China, 40 years of reform and opening and marathon talks with behind-the-scenes stories from the experts and innovators who are the change that China will be. I'm Laurence Brahm.
Hi, I'm Yang Xinmeng.
And welcome to China, Reform and Opening, 40 Years in Perspective.
Today we are going to talk about the core values in Chinese socialism.
But to understand Chinese socialism, it's not about understanding 40 years of reform and opening. It's about understanding 4,000 years of a very complex history involving Confucianism, Taoism, Buddhism, and a whole host of ideas that have come in to make China what it is today, China.
Right. So to set the stage for today's show, here's a brief introduction of the core values.
The Chinese civilization and its unique value system date back thousands of years. Harmony, benevolence, and loyalty, amongst others, are values constantly advancing with the times and have their own continuity and stability. They are the codes of conduct for generations of Chinese, subtly affecting living habits and national identity and psychology. Now in the new era, how are these traditional thoughts reflected in modern society? What are the socialist values that are advocated? We'll explore the spiritual world of modern Chinese people.
Xinmeng, how important really are Confucian values today in understanding what China is?
Well, I think although after over 2,500 years, Confucius is still very important. It's still in every aspect of today's life.
So actually, all of these traditional values of China, which have come over these millennia of change and transformation, are in the DNA of the people today.
Exactly.
So it's not just looking at socialism or a political name on the outside, it's actually looking at the core philosophies.
Yes,
wow.
Exactly.
Well, today we have an incredible lineup of guests because to understand these core values and the philosophies underlying them, we have artists, singers, and a historian who's going to teach us about what's underlying all of these things that we understand today as China.
Yes, well, let's introduce them.
Great. I'm going to first begin by introducing artist and painter Chu Jianxiong from Nankai University School of Oriental Art, and he's the head of the school.
Well, let me introduce creative designing artist Flora Zeta Chengling. Welcome.
And Chen Xingdong, who is the curator par excellence, who has made a lot of China's super artists, celebrity artists today famous through his spectrum of galleries in 798, where he was one of the founding galleries.
And let me introduce a famous singer in China, Chen Ling. Welcome.
Hello. And I'd like to introduce my colleague from the Beijing Foreign Languages University, Dr. David Barshosh, and he's an expert not only on Confucianism, but on a spectrum of Chinese history, philosophy, and values, and we have a lot to learn from you today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We're going to begin by talking about Confucianism, and one of the things that when people visit Beijing they find really interesting is a place called Guozijian. And Guozijian is one of these very, very ancient alleyways with trees and Pailo, these gates. And in there is the Confucian temple. And why would they have a temple to Confucius? He's not a god, but he is so respected because of his foundation and influence on Chinese culture, not only in China, but as that culture spread out, Japan, Korea, all over Southeast Asia, we have these influences of Confucianism. The question today, with so many influences coming into China, social media, everything, telecommunications, is should China be embracing Western values, Western consumerism, or should be looking to the root of its own values? I'm going to begin by asking our guests this question. Chu Jianxiong. Let's begin with Chu Jianxiong. And first of all, Chu Jianxiong, I remember that we first met in Nankai University in 1981. I was a student learning Chinese, and you were actually an art student then. And I remember it was very difficult for art students to be able to get access to foreign art books, and I was bringing them to you, and then you were, showing us what the modern painters were doing. So put it in perspective. First of all, tell me about how you've changed. You went to San Francisco, you've come back. Are you embracing Western values, or are you embracing Chinese values?
是这样，我跟龙先生认识大概是1981年。龙先生这个问题让我想到一个什么问题，就是大家知道，就是说，有一本书，可能全世界老百姓都喜欢看的一本书，然后这本书的名叫什么呢？叫《微观经济学》。微观经济学的其中有一章叫福利经济学。福利经济学最后有一章。 还有一个规则叫什么？帕洛托改进。帕托改进的意思就是说什么？一部分人的财富可以增加，一部分人的财富不能减少。所以让我想到。
Translate first.
Okay, let me translate it to our audience. So he actually met with Laurence in 1981, and by the time he said he read a book, which is a famous book, 微观经济学 (Microeconomy), the philosophy of microeconomy. So, and then you said
福利经济学。
福利经济学 Who can translate that? 福利
Welfare economics.
Welfare, yeah, welfare,
yeah.
yeah.
Then please
因为
continue.
我谈的问题就是说，就如同今天的中国这个现状也是一样，就是说，当代艺术可以增加，但是传统艺术不能减少，这是一个底线。
So, as he said, for nowadays in our life, we can have more modern arts, but we can't decrease the amount of the traditional arts, the traditional culture. That still plays a very important role in today's culture, in today's life.
Yeah, on that matter, can I jump in?
Sure, of course,
yeah?
Zhang Lin.
I'm from this ancient city called Luoyang. Has 5,000 years of history. Actually, the weather and the creation has all come from Luoyang. It is so much history. When I grew up in this city, I didn't know what there was until I went to a Western country, and I realized how rich this Chinese civilization and the roots, and it's just so rich. And I walk star. A lot of people hear me sing. Song is called Horn. Everybody saying and now influenced 3 generations. But I found is that I was 6 years old. I started learning the Chinese violin. Kind of abandoned it because at that time, in the 80s, everybody wanted Western influence, music and rock and roll, and and movies. But not after I've been seeing the world, I realized critical and important it is to keep the root of our music and instruments and culture. So I started going back to roots. Now I play with the simple a month ago. It was wonderful. Now we really, the whole world is coming together, but we have to keep our own culture. And it's like a unity in diversity. We also have to learn how to open ourselves to Western culture. Cannot keep the nationalism too narrowly. So that's my point. So we
Flora,
have to be open.
now I've known you for years. When you were a fashion designer, you were fusing Chinese motifs with Western motifs. I remember that your fashion shows were mobbed because people just saw this kind of fusion. So tell me, is it about Confucian values or Western values or a mixture? And in your own career, what have you seen in your own transformation?
I think I grew up, my father's from South America, Chinese, and I just was always the outside culture. Whether in South America, we're family in West Indians, Chinese, mixed with blacks. We've never been the mainstream culture. So I just lived my life that way. And I moved to England, same. Chinese, Western, everything. We have Chinese supermarkets, restaurants. Nobody eats Chinese all the time. We're always integrating. So in China right now, for 25 years, I never lived Western or Chinese. It's always integrated and building cross-culture, pluralism. I'm mixing bagua, martial arts, with modern dance, with classical traditional ballet, and merging a new syllabi. So if you cannot, don't give up yourself, but you have to become contemporary. I think that's...
I think Flora has influenced me a lot as friends because she really, when she talks about China and the culture, she has so much love and deep respect for this culture because it's such a rich culture. But at the same time, we both recognize that we are very open, and she is so open to all of this. And then she really influenced so many people and her students, and also we're the co-founders of the Cloud Society, which is this a bunch of entrepreneurs and artists together, because we really wanted to help the arts to evolve, to develop, you know. So I think Flora and Xingdong as well, you know, he has been doing this. I've say your words. He's the host. Let him ask.
Yeah, Xingdong has actually been influencing all of us, because I think there was a certain point when Xingdong was, you know, bringing together all of these artists across China. You were bringing them from Yunnan, from everywhere, and I think what struck everybody when we used to have these salons at your home in the Siheyan, in the courtyard, was the way these artists were fusing Chinese cultural motifs and thoughts, and many of the juxtaposed against the Western influences, the changes, and it was really like entering the psychology of China today by entering your home and your gallery. Tell us how you influenced Chinese art and how Chinese art has influenced all of us.
First, I should say Confucianism is deeply part of Chinese culture. The civilization is like the philosophy. It's also like the region of Chinese culture. It's everywhere. It's not a problem. It's when you visit China everywhere, go to the mountains, you visit the river, the small village, Confucius is everywhere. But the situation has changed since the beginning of 80s, because now we live, before we lived in the very small world, maybe around surrounding 5 kilometers, and little by little, 100 kilometers. Now we live in the globalization. It's not a problem of the question of the value of the Confucianism. It's only the interest of the Chinese people. The new generation, even the old generation, what they are seeing every day. Their life changed. Before they eat, drink Mao-Tai, alcohol. Now they are drinking wine. So it's not a question of the, because Chinese people, like others, we live in a now open world. They're interested by others, other civilizations, other philosophies, other volumes. We just spent since beginning of 14 years, beginning of 18th. So it's a big loss for everybody of the world, even for Chinese. They can meet different philosophies, different volumes, and they want to try, want to learn, want to know. And then, when we are after so many years, we are talking renew or rescind Confucianism. Maybe each brings some different meanings, different understandings. So that's why I think I agree we should protect the tradition, protect our tradition values. It's very important to keep open mind, to say what are happening, what are also other values of civilizations of the world.
I really like that word. She said renewal, because you can't just go back to in the back, in history. You have to keep evolve, renewal. Yeah.
But for a moment, let's go back and let's put everything in perspective with history. And David, you are like the foremost researcher on Confucian history, philosophy. I think you've also been doing a lot of work on this very significant figure. Is it Wang Yangming from the Ming Dynasty?
I wrote a book about Wang Yangming from a comparative perspective. So
why is Wang Yangming important? I understand the President of China also, talks a lot about him in many of his, talks. So why is it so important?
Yeah, first of all, I will answer your question, but maybe I need some time to start with.
Yes.
First of all, I wanted to say everything that I have heard so far here is very traditional in the original Chinese sense, because actually the Confucian tradition always, in its core, always has been a very open tradition, right? Confucius in the Lonyu, he says, "You pang ze yuan fang lai bui le hu." Isn't it a wonderful thing to have friends coming from far away and to learn from them and to have dialogue with each other, right? So this element always has been part of Confucian tradition, and so we in the history we see there is always this openness, and at the same time also the cultural confidence, as it's called today, right? This cultural consciousness, and also the this aspect of holding this cultural memory in very high esteem. So there is these two sides. We have the cultural memory, and I think today for China the most important thing is, on one side, is to also to revive the cultural confidence. I always tell that to my students. But on the other side, it is also important to acquire some intercultural fitness. So the two sides are very important, and this is very Chinese. This is Chinese from the start. So this openness to absorb other elements, beneficial elements, useful elements from other civilizations, and to integrate into one's own sphere of civilization. And now to Wang Yangming, so it was a long way to start to answer your question. I think Wang Yangming is a very fascinating philosopher, because he is his philosophy very much is at the beginning of Chinese modernization. So all the great leaders, starting from Sun Zhongshan, they studied Wang Yangming's thoughts, and so this is a tradition. Chinese modernity is very much connected to these ideas to be found in Wang Yangming's thought, and I think Wang Yangming is a very good choice. So it is very good to apply his ideas today, because his philosophy is in a sense timeless, because it's not a theory. It is more about a practice. And the most important idea in Wang Yangming's thought is expressed in the term 知良知. So that means the extension of good knowing. Extension of good knowing, and this extension of good knowing, the knowing and the acting become one. 知行合一. So knowing and acting become one. And the last part of the answer would be, and at the same time, so this idea of Wang Yangming can be fused with also the modern philosophical foundations of China, the Marxist foundations. It's very close. Some ideas of Confucianism and Marxism are very close, actually. And at the same time, Wang Yangming also transports this ancient idea of the primordial goodness of the human being. So when a human being comes into this world, it is good. It is born as a good being. So we just have to cultivate that state of inner goodness. We have to believe. Wang Yangming talks about 自信, self-believing. We have to believe ourselves and make that good and prove that goodness to ourselves by acting it out. And this is the gift that China can provide to the world, not just to itself, to its own civilization, also to teach others, I think.
Chen-Lin, I see you nodding, and is a rock star who goes around the world performing.
You are the rock star today.
You're the rock star. So,
We can rock together.
all right, but how would you, as a rock star, apply Wang Yangming's philosophy of goodness, knowing, and self-confidence as you go around the world performing and presenting Chinese music through your own synthesis and modern forms?
Actually, I really appreciate what he said because it reminds me as a Chinese, as an artist, that you can influence younger generation and also come from raised by two artists. My mom was a Chinese opera singer. My father was a drummer and director. And from a very young age, I grew up in Luoyang, and you have seen so many history there. And you know, 白居易、杜甫在唐朝、宋唐，他们都在那边。They were in the Song dynasty. Luoyang has 13 dynasties. So it's a really incredible history. So every time I go back, I'm overwhelmed by the history and by how little I know. By listening to David, I was like, I need to go back to learn Wang Yangming's, writings. And this is an opportunity for all of us to come together to really to reflect. For me as an artist, I was very young. I have maybe 15 songs that really made it's a big hit. Yeah. 心东肯定会唱我的歌. I bet he knows some of my songs. I play the Chinese.
So sweet. People just melt listening to that.
So it's very interesting at this time that I can go back to my roots at the same time to go further. Because I play my violin with the rock and roll, with flamenco, and with jazz. This is the time that you can do that. But at the same time, we cannot keep closed door. Like, I think in China, in Beijing, Flora and I were in the car. We're talking about we don't have a lot of issues with racial issues. But actually, to me, we have 地域 issues. We have, like somebody from Shanghai, people Shanghai, Beijing. We have different people from different backgrounds, and the culture has a slightly different. So we also need to adjust that. As see friends and people as one country, one nation. As a matter of fact, I'm a musician. I always say musicians and artists, we're the ambassadors of love. Because when you play music, there's no language barrier. It's a universal language. So, and artists, we attend to, really, we can, if they're like few artists together, I bring my art who I can jam with them. There's no problem. There's no language problem. There's no, if I can just jam with the rock band or jazz band. But it takes a courage for me to really step out of my comfort zone. This is what I found. Most of my generation, the artists, they tend to stay in their comfort zone. So then it's hard for you to really open. So I'm not criticizing anybody, but sometimes I think it takes people like us. We're like Xindong and Flora and Qu Jiaoshou and David. We're here. We're trying to collaborate. We're trying to inspire people to really open our minds and open our thoughts and to step out of our comfort zone and really see the world as one. This is a human race. Look at you. You can't say your children, Can you say they're Americans or Chinese? In the world, in the future, there's so many, mixed racials or Chinese living overseas in other countries. But because of China has 5,000 years of history, that doesn't make us like we're better, we know everything. It doesn't. Like young countries like America, 300, 200 years history, but they have also laid the reasoned, new civilization for humanity. So I think this is time that we all find our roots as a human race. That's a one race. We're going to find common, future that's work towards that goal.
We're going to take a short break, and as Chen-Lin said, we're going to come back and find our common future. Thank you. To China, Reform and Opening, 40 years in perspective, looking at the values of China today and reflecting back on Confucian influences. Now, Flora, we just heard from David about the importance in Wang Yangming's thinking, about this, everybody's pure, everybody has a bright light inside and just needs to be opened up and unveiled. Isn't that a core concept of Buddhism? And haven't you been doing a lot of that with your ballet teaching and your own studies?
I think it's very important to really go back to our own gut. It's like we are people. We're not male, female. We're not Western. We're not Chinese. We are people. And I don't see a choice now, especially our enemy is the computer. I mean, of course, that's our best friend. If I lose my phone, I'll die. But it's a computer. It goes so fast.
I think our enemy is our possible stupidity, which
yes.
can
How we
which
can
is
mess
related
up.
to using it in the wrong way.
Using it like this. So they are so fast, and the kids, they don't like you, delete, move on, move on. So how are we going to create this? So I went to find some friends in Tianjin. There's this wonderful school. They attract very big schools like Yale, Columbia, Hong Kong people from New York, London. They stop studying for a year. They go and learn about Confucianism, how to grow food, how to 鞠躬, 礼貌, 尊重大家, all this respect for each other. Chinese medicine. Get up 6 o'clock and do your Tai Chi, do your Bagua, do everything. And how to eat without, how to clean toilets, how to be, when war comes tomorrow, I'm with banks, I am having a huge company, 上市, everything about, going public. But how do you respect your parents? How do we pack up and leave? How to, 人性. So Buddhism, Confucianism, Taoism, whatever ism, we need to practice our own kindness first.
First, we should learn all these values, Confucianism, Taoism, whatever. It's because we're in a very special time. Yeah. Even for Chinese people, I don't know if the education of the traditions, so still very, very small part of the education in the schools. Yeah. So we still don't know this kind of what mean Confucianism. I think it's very difficult. So we are still learning. At the same time, the world is changing so quickly. So we are meeting different other civilization, other ism.
Yes.
So we are still looking for the cultural identity. So who we are. So it's so much happening. It's very confused. So it's very difficult period. I think since 14 years economic reform, now is the good time. We have time. We have we try so many things. Now it's time to thinking what are the traditions? How can we, transform them to the contemporary art life? And how we can keep, our cultures for the future, and also facing, the influence of Westernism. So it's not problem of the Westernism, it's how you can to take the volumes from them and to ask ourselves what are our cultural identities. For contemporary art, artists also the same, because since more than 13 years, the contemporary art creations, now many artists go back to the traditions, try to understand what they are doing, and try find new resources, ideas, for the future. So I think it's very important.
I think also the tradition is the key word here, because what is tradition, right? We have to think about the concept. And in my opinion, tradition does not mean a reactionary going back to ancient forms and just repeating ancient dead forms which can be found in books. Tradition is something which is alive. Tradition is always alive. So tradition always means to be inspired, as you just said, to be inspired by the old forms and to create new forms which are related to the old forms and which develop and progress these old forms further on. And of course, in the progress of this And tradition always incorporated outside elements.
Right.
It was just, if you look at Tang Dynasty, or even before the official Silk Road, you find Chinese jade from the 4th century BCE, where you have motifs from Central Asia. So there always has been inspirations from the outside, and nevertheless, a particular Chinese tradition evolved out of this, going back to the old forms of one's own stream and also incorporating new elements from the outside and creating something new. And I think what we have to keep in mind about tradition today, we have to sort out. Some elements of tradition might not be applicable
Exactly.
anymore. Like for example,
I agree with
but
that.
I mean,
Yeah.
the worst example of tradition in China, maybe binding of women's feet, right?
Exactly,
Nobody means binding.
yeah.
Nobody needs that anymore.
Yeah.
So we put that away for a reason.
Right.
Women
Tradition
have
is
been
very
liberated.
abstract.
But then I think
but there are so many
tradition,
great
this
useful
word,
elements.
has different meaning now. Actually, tradition to a lot of generation now thinking, oh, it's going backwards.
Yes,
it's
but
no
it
good.
is not.
No,
It
it's
is-
not. It's a new form of taking risks.
Yes.
Taking risks. It's like tradition, bind feet, women don't go out. Don't do anything, don't say anything.
Yeah, that has been
But
put
that
away
is
for
We
a
wrong.
reason.
ban the old
We
bad
are-
tradition. We keep
We are
value
creating
that-
our relationship with computers now, with maybe computer people in the future. What is our roles, male and female? How do we do this? That is very important. How we protect and how being a tiger mom. Is that safe? No. Are those values? Is that security? Tomorrow can be a tsunami.
Sounds like it's really important because over the years, going back to 1981 in Tianjin, we had food, we hardly had clothes because it was an economy of scarcity. It moved into an economy of surplus. Did values change? Did people start to go crazy over money, worship money? A lot of your art has dealt with the question of money. I remember you did one piece where the dollar bills were huge because of the relationship between man and money. We'll start with Chu, but let's everybody jump in. Is Chinese values being attacked by the value of money worship, which actually comes right out of the capitalist system, the idea of the free market, the idea that the invisible hand will make everything work, so people chase after the dollar, chasing the dragon, chasing the dollar. Are people chasing the dollar?
traditional，因为对不起，我最近做一个作品
Please speak.
因为这个作品就是说，一年我只讲母语，
只讲什么？
只讲母语，
只讲母语。
只讲母语，
是
只
所以
有一个作品。
他现在不肯讲英语，就讲中
This is
文
an。English show because CGTN is broadcasting around the world. And while everybody needs to learn Chinese, they haven't caught up yet. So we're going to be speaking English on CGTN. The world's going to be hearing you. Okay?
Even you don't speak English, then you're against English.
Okay.
Against
speak
tradition.
I remember Patrick Harris said, "Give me liberty or give me death."
Right.
为了更好的解释我的想法，刚才这位先生说那个中国传统，我觉得传统和当代是两个系统。传统是什么？传统是史，它已经尘埃落地了，所以说我们很容易评价它说好或者不好，对不对？但是当代艺术，就是说当代艺术、当代艺术教育、当代艺术家、当代艺术的成果，100年以后仍然会有争论，但是行之久远，必然僵化。
Well, so actually he is on a project that he decides to only speak his native mother tongue, Chinese, for a whole year. And what he just said is he thinks tradition and modern are two different things. And tradition has already become history, and you can very easily evaluate it. But for modern arts, modern culture, you will have to evaluate, to criticize it after 100 years. So you don't know what it is now. You can say, you can put a decision on it.
年少无知的时候，如果就是说我自己年少无知的时候，大家问我你喜欢哪个朝代，我一定说，刚才就是程琳说了唐，那我一定会回答唐，大唐盛世嘛。宋是打必败，积弱不振，我感觉到很丢脸。但是我在史书上看到这么一段书，我觉得很震惊。就是说，宋有一次又败了， 然后契丹就说这次我不要钱，我要13斤，就是说我不要钱，我宁肯要书，因为这个文化太高了。但是宋说了，我宁肯加倍给你钱，我不给你这个书。这真是有一种文化的自信。
Okay, so when he was young, when he was asked by people what dynasty he likes most, he will definitely say it's Tang dynasty because Tang is so successful and is such a prosperous dynasty in the history. And but for now, he read a book about Song dynasty, the history of Song dynasty, and in one war, Song lost again, right? But after it lost, it says he values culture more. It can give the other its enemy more money to save its books, to save the culture. So he thinks Song dynasty is way more better than Tang now. That's changed his answer to that question.
I'm going to just cut it because actually our audience understands why is Chu's insisting on speaking Chinese is because this is actually a kind of movement that he's kind of become part of. We're insisting on using the mother tongue and language. However, CGTN is speaking English to the rest of the world, and until Fox News begins to have a Chinese language program, which sooner or later they're going to have, we're going to continue with English. And I'm going to ask you, Flora, is there too much money value, or is there enough traditional values? How do we get back to our traditions, or is money overwhelming everybody these days?
I think when you look in search of Shangri-La long time ago, you already asked me this question. And at that time I said Shangri-La is where your heart lies and where you are able to do things without only communicating in only forms of financial and status of what kind of car and what kind of house, what kind of background you're from. So I continue after so many years to believe that I think I would only want people to understand we're not living in security just because we have come from very good schools, or we're coming from a very strong or weak nation, or what we wear, what we have financially, because everything's going to go without these things. Security, I think, is from your tradition, innate goodness, and what you're building on top of that. You cannot just live the way we are, because the computer, I always say, is there. Later on, I've always studied something that my parents say, there's no money in there. Ballet. An artist 可以1100万 financially, a piece of paper or a statue. I do this a million times and I dance. Is it worth a ticket? But my security is that we are humans, we can create. But computer can surpass the whole bank. You know, so values is what we have. We are lucky. I'm saying to my parents, I've never been so proud being Chinese. Before, when I was in the Royal Ballet School, I wanted to be like English people. Frightfully, I would speak like that because I want to be English. But it is all about yourself. We are so lucky that we are here. I can speak 10 languages. I can travel anywhere. We can be independent. I can use everything pluralism, the more you can add on together to become something of your own originality. I think that is where we all have to go. No choice.
I think it's different volumes. Of course, money has the value, a very strong value. We can do so many things. We can do charity, we can help the people, we can open schools, open, whatever, the highway, whatever. But it's not the value of, the final objective of life. The value of life is different. We need spirituality, we need commercialism, we need what kind of, religions, whatever, to do. But it's, how to say, I think you should separate it to different volumes. And also, we talk about the volumes for the different people, what position they are, what they want to do. I think it's very important. The value is very abstract. Like we talk about the tradition. Tradition is abstraction. But we can say, for example, we are talking about the culture, art, tradition, art, and cultures. They are only some kind of experience, some kind of forms people in the old time, the artists painted the landscapes by the ink, paper, pencils. But still, they are the tools, not only the volumes of the creations, but now contemporary artists can use these kind of tools, still can use paper, ink, whatever, but different expressions. What we want to say through art can introduce the new contemporary volumes through the traditional cultural forms. It's different,
Yeah, it's communication.
It's not the same.
Different
There's some
mediums.
I think we should separate it. Of course, the life we need, spirituality, we need religion, we need Confucianism to do, but not money. But not money can find the solution of everyday life.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think money. What is money? Money is something neutral. In itself, it is neutral. It depends on how it's used and in which context it is used, right? And you were just talking about, you were mentioning the worshipping of money, right? And I mean, we can ask ourselves, where does the Western banks come from? They start in ancient Sumer and Babylon. The temples were the first banks.
Really?
They were they were the first banks. They were giving loans, right? So
Where
and
is this?
in Sumer, Mesopotamia.
Is it?
Mesopotamia.
Uh-huh.
Ancient Sumer and Babylon.
Oh.
They were the first banks in the Western Hemisphere, and so here the money was also, the political systems were always related to religions, to belief systems. So belief and money was combined. And in China we have something else in the tradition, namely that in the ancient empire there was no dogmatic belief system. There was no religion. Not like in Persia. In Persia you had Zoroastrianism as a state religion for organizing the empire, but in China not. And another important thing is the Chinese administration or politics was never combined with religion. It was culture, it was art, it was the Liu Yi, the Confucian administrator as a child, had to start to become a master in a holistic education of Liu Yi. So to master all these different aspects like charioteering, painting or calligraphy, poetry, mathematics, archery, and forgot the sixth one now. So these six elements, right? And so the culturedness of the administrators, the important thing. The people who decide, they should not be bound by certain fixed, stiff beliefs. They should be artists and cultivated people, constantly learning and refining themselves. And I think this element, I would not say this is better than the other. The Western world also has produced a lot of progress and a lot of inspiring new invention and so forth, but we have to see how to sort out the best elements of both spheres, right? And also in the Western world to put away things which are not, which will not help us to master the future problems, ecological problems and so forth. And we should also start to learn some elements from Chinese traditions. And we have to connect, as you said, we have to connect on a global level and sort out the good aspects.
You know, in LA, I have friends, they say, oh, we have a new religion. And I said, what is it? And then all my Jewish friends, it's Jubus. And I said, what's Jubus? It says Jewish and Buddhism. I said, oh, really? I said, yeah, we pray Buddhism, but yet Judaism, you know, we're all interlinked, and this is a new way. I said, fine, I think it's great.
I think
Why
the world
not?
is becoming together, you know, because it's as a you know, grew up in this ancient city. I have a lot of old tradition that's from the family, and also Luoyang is the Buddhism, the first official Buddha temple, Baima Si, the white temple, was originated from Luoyang.
Right.
Actually, there's a monk, Tang Xuanzang. He was the first one went to Indian to bring Buddhism back. So actually, I grew up in this tradition. But at the same time, I found that you really have to learn from the world. Like I met David and Susan Rockefeller a couple of years ago. I was so inspired by their family because I went to, you know, the 协和医院在北京. It was founded by their family. And I met them, I said, wow, it's the sixth generation of this Rockefeller family. There's a tradition in China 说富不过三, the wealth cannot compass three generations. But now what we're going to learn from that? Flora and I, a few other friends, we decided to form and start this foundation. A part of I was inspired by them because it's money depends how you're going to use it. They have so much money, right. But when I met David and Susan, they're just so simple, lived such a simple life. I was so inspired. So I said, well, Flora, let's start something. So we started this foundation called the Cloud Foundation. We're supporting in Beijing. We're supporting young artists. We're supporting this young pianist, and he's studying in the U.S. And we also sending classes to the rural areas to give them art and music classes. So we have been doing this for the past 3 years. So this, I think that we are growing and we're learning, and we become. I'm Chinese. I can't change. But also, I want to be a global citizen. I'm a citizen of the world. That's one of my songs called Citizen of the World. So, yes? Citizens
of the world. Globalization did not begin with the World Economic Forum. It began with the Silk Road. And as Chen-Lin's been talking about supporting young artists, after our break, we're going to be inspired by a very young and dynamic artist. So stay tuned.
40 years of China's opening and reform. I look back, remembering the changes. In 1981, I came here as a student. I became a lawyer and economist, working with China ever since. I advised foreign investors entering China and worked with the Chinese government, drafting the regulations that made it happen. In the 1990s, with globalization, I helped China reform state-owned enterprises, turning them into multinational corporations that would compete on the global stage. In the past decades, I advised on environmental policy that would help China become the world's leader on renewable energy. I have not just observed, but also participated in each stage of China's reform and opening. Now, it's time to tell the story of these past 40 years of reform and opening that has made China the global economy that it is today. It is not about looking back, but learning how we got here and looking toward the future that we will create together. Join me, Laurence Brahm, for China, 40 years of reform and opening, and marathon talks with behind-the-scenes stories from the experts and innovators who are the change that China will be. Welcome back to China, Reform and Opening, 40 years, and talking about China's values in the spectrum, not just over 40 years, but 4,000 years. Xinmeng?
Yeah, well, Lawrence, we have a special guest to join us now.
Really?
Yeah, so Tibetan singer Ga Rang Deng Zhen, welcome.
Let's give a big round of applause.
Hello, everyone. No
Bravo.
Great.
Thank you.
I'd like to begin by asking how the values of the Qinghai Tibetan Plateau can actually affect, or how they can, affect us today, because there's so much focus on money and materialism, and this kind of singing is just pure expression of nature. So tell me about those values.
觉得青藏高原的这个价值是如何在影响我们现在的生活的这个价值观？
我觉得，青藏高原的文化从整个人类的这种文化的发展来说是影响很大。包括我现在，全世界各个地方演出的时候，我去接触各种宗教、不同的文化，然后呢，我就想到追溯到我们青藏高原的这种文化的这个主要像藏区的话就是佛教文化，佛教文化。主要是像古老的从喜马拉雅文化来讲的话，就是讲古老的这个本教喜马拉雅文化山脉的影响了很多，像整个亚洲，像印度，像当地的巴基斯坦、拉达克、伊拉克等等的他们的这个宗教文化。所以呢，就是它是一种。
So let's translate it first. So he said in the development process of the human culture, Tibetan culture actually plays a very big, very important role in the whole human culture. And he performed in a lot of places worldwide, and he also meets with other culture. And he said that Tibetan culture is still a very important one, and it was by the Buddhism culture, the Tibetan Buddhism culture, a lot.
其实我们现在看来，从古老的这种文化的传承和这个发展，大家可能感觉到，就是有时候好像感觉到好像跟藏文化没关系。其实，从归根到底，就像很多中国国家不同民族、不同信仰的人，每年想一切办法办签证来到喜马拉雅，来到我们中国的境内，来到西藏的阿里，来到这个噶尔木区去朝拜，来这个吸取自己的心灵。这就是一个文化的根源，这就是一个藏文化的一个影响。我觉得这就是青藏高原的对整个人类、整个不同民族、全世界的这种影响啊。所以我觉得这跟刚才所问的这个问题是相互的符合的。
Okay, so he said that it seems like the other cultures at other places of the world, it doesn't relate it with the Zang culture, Tibetan culture, but actually the Tibetan culture is actually in the root. So there are so many people from different parts of the world, international people. They applied for a visa to come to Tibet every year to purify their soul and heart, and that's the spirit of the Tibetan culture.
Now, we've been talking about Confucian values, and I'll tell you a story. One of my friends, he was with the Academy of Social Sciences in Lhasa. He's Tibetan, and his daughter was in school and university. university here in Beijing. And he said to me, oh, she's going to graduate from university. Laurence, you know a lot of foreign companies. Get her a high-paying job so she can have a better life in Beijing in terms of material benefit. So she came to my studio one day, and I was saying, I'm going to introduce you to this CEO and that CEO. She goes, no. She goes, Uncle Laurence, don't help me. Actually, I don't want to work for a foreign company in Beijing. I want to go back to Lhasa so I can take care of my parents and be closer to my family. And that surprised me a lot. But that seems to be very filial piety type of value. Is it common in the Tibetan plateau?
所以 Laurence 说，他其实有一个朋友在西藏，然后他这个朋友的女儿在北京上学，然后这个朋友找他，就是说我女儿快毕业了，能不能给她找一份收入高的工作，在北京找一个外企。然后这个 Laurence 就给他女儿介绍了一些 CEO 啊公司的，但是这个女儿说 Laurence 叔叔，我不要帮助我，我不想要去给外企打工，我想要回家。回家去照顾我的父母，其实，然后 Laurence 说这是不是也是一种孝道文化？
对，其实藏文化的像这个我们小时候的这种代代传承的这种文化的习惯，就是孝敬老人是第一。在藏区，在青藏高原，在中国西部的少数民族，这样类似的这个事情是非常多的。比如说像我们这个家乡来说，一个孩子他有一个奶奶，但是奶奶呢，就是小时候他没有条件去。青藏就是去往拉萨，去往那个西藏的阿里地区，刚才所说的冈仁波齐去转山。但是呢，现在孩子长大了，已经20岁了，然后呢，老奶奶坐车又不行，坐车的话会晕车，然后他就一路冒着这个风雪，然后一路就是把他背在这个背上，然后一路的走路，走了大概几年的时间，来到青藏高原转一座山。我觉得这个有一种这个孝道的一种心理，包括对我自己来说的话，我小时候是我的爷爷我没见过，但是
我先翻一下。
Okay,
sorry. It's kind of too long. So he actually said it is very common. These kind of stories are very common in Tibet. So filial piety is still a major important pillar in family structure in Tibet. So he told us a story that there's a grandma in Tibet. And you know, Tibet has culture to 转山, to circle around mountain, to worship the god in a mountain. And the grandma is very old now, so it's not convenient for her to travel so far to 转山. And so his grandson, I think, 是孩子家里的小孩。
对，小孩就是孙子嘛，然后长大了。
So her grandson actually carried her on his back and traveled for days. Years, traveled for years. I'm sorry.
几年？
对，几年对。
Traveled for years to circle around the mountain to.
Now wait a minute. I need to ask our in-house professor of Confucian culture, David. I have a question because now we're hearing that this is in Tibetan culture. This is something that sounds to me very filial, very Confucian. But actually, are these values? Do we have to lock them into these sort of like silos? This is Confucian. This is Taoist. This is Tibetan. Is this actually part of the Asian values? This enormous respect for parents and respect for family and care for family. And of course, as Chenlin's talked about, the bigger family, the society. Is this something that's just...
It is a very, very good question. And also thank you very much for these comments and statements. I think, first of all, what came to mind when I heard him speaking was that also we talked about Wang Yangming.
Yes.
And in Confucian or Chinese universal spirituality, Confucian, Taoist, also containing Buddhist elements and other schools, this universal spirituality of the Chinese civilization, we have this term Shengren. And the Shengren is the enlightened master, so to speak. It's the one who finds Tao, Wu Dao. The one who has found the Tao is the Shengren. And Wang Yangming said that the Shengren and the Buddha, they are actually the same. They have the same consciousness. They find the same form of consciousness, but they reach the same level. But maybe their life forms are a little bit different. At that time, he said he talked about the Buddha as an Indian. The Buddha is the context is in India. At that time he said that, so the life forms are a little bit different, but actually it's the same form of realization. So that's the first point. And I think the second point I wanted to make is, and then I really answer your question, but it's like also again I have to start with this. The second thing is, you talked about unity in multiplicity and multiplicity in unity
in diversity.
Diversity, and I think this is a very important point here because the multiplicity has to be nurtured, because that's where all the creativity comes from. The more different forms of life the more cultural memories we can nurture and keep alive, the more creative possible inputs we can gain, the more ideas we can cultivate to address our future problems. So we should, and to answer your question precisely, I think if we put away all the ancient aspects of worldviews, Tibetan Buddhist worldview, ancient Chinese worldviews, maybe worldviews now in Southeast Asia, if we put away these things, we will see there is something I call the natural personality, or the natural person. The natural person means all of us, we are born into this world in families. At least if we're very lucky. Of course, there are some special cases, orphans and so forth, but usually the normal cases, we have parents, we grow up in family relations. This is the original human situation. And of course, Confucius was wise enough to take this situation as a starting point for his worldview. But nevertheless, we find the same situation everywhere. Also talk to people from Southeast Asia. They said, oh yeah, we're the same. We are very, in a sense, we are like the Confucians. We do everything for our parents, and the parents do everything for us. And the same in Europe. I mean, we have lost a little bit our values too, but if you would go back 100 years in Europe, you would see the young people, they were always caring for the grandparents. So this is not a special Confucian trait, but the Confucians have reflected on this aspect.
Now we talk about core socialist values.
Yes.
Xinmeng, are you going to tell us a little bit about those values?
Well, these are core socialist values. So there are 12 values in total, and it was divided into 3 groups. So the national values we can see is prosperity, democracy, civility, and harmony. And then social values, there are freedom, equality, justice, rule of law, and the personal values, there are patriotism, dedication, integrity, and friendship. So these are actually first brought up, I think, in the 18th National People's Congress. Yeah, as the socialism core values.
But how much are those socialist values, or how much of those are actually the Asian traditional values that are at the root of the culture? I mean, how much of this is something coming in from the outside, because socialism came in as a Western concept, and how much of those early ideas of socialism were actually coming in from Asia? Because I mean, if you really want to experience pure socialism, you go into a Buddhist or Taoist monastery, and that's it. I mean, that's the reality. Or at the village life, in fact, in any village in China. That family value, what we were talking about just now. So how much of this is something from the outside, or how much of it is just a silver coating on actually something that's very, very deep within our culture here?
Well, can I jump in? Yeah. I think, I'm from this ancient city, which is, I found, there's so much happened in the past. Actually, all those virtues that all exist in our tradition, in the cultures, like 有朋从远方来，不亦乐乎, care for elderly, and be friends with your neighbors. It's all in our culture. But in the past 40 years, we have lost some of them. But that's normal, because society is evolving. And there were special times we're closed, and now we're opening for the past 40 years. So I like the word Xindong was using, renewal. This is why we have to keep open. We have to really be, able to look back, but the reason we look back is we learn those traditions, we remind ourselves, but keep going forward. Because, it will never go backwards. It's go backwards, looking, reflecting, is for how do you go forward. And I think, the Western civilization, and like when you said, we don't need to put at the same time, like let's label ourselves in the Tibetan time, the time that's we don't need to give all of that 2,000 years of Taoist, Confucius, because they already have their values. But this is at the time everywhere in the world they have their own values. But this is the time ever that because the internet time, but linked everybody together. Now we can reflect and learn from each other. But the whole, you said, let's see how much is from the past. It's really hard to say. But we have to keep open and see all those virtues as humanity. We all need to learn. As we can't say this is your virtue, this is it's humanity. Exactly. We're all come
and
together.
Also, as an Asian woman, coming in the opposite side from Chenlin, I'm brought up in the West. South American Chinese had to travel from Guyana to England to everywhere and then to Hong Kong. The good thing about Chinese people, majority, wherever you live, you immigrate, or you go to America, you have a passport, they say, I am American. This on the surface. But all Asians, a lot of them, they still practice traditional beliefs. Wherever they are, they actually influence other people. And every time I come back, it's not convenient, I don't speak Mandarin before, but I have to find, wow, it's cool to come to a place where I can make a difference. I can help my own people. I studied in Paris. Do you think I'm going to make a difference in Paris or London or New York?
And I have another important issue, another answer to your question. I think we also have to keep in mind, if we, this is part of my, I'm thinking a lot about the world and how things historically are connected. And if we look back at the history of European economy, the first academic economist, as it is said usually, is François Quesnay. He was called the French Confucius, 18th century, age of enlightenment. A French Confucius, because he studied actually writings sent to him by people who worked in China at the court about Wu-wei economy, Wu-wei, the principle of Wu-wei, not to interfere. And this is how he developed the laissez-faire, the idea of laissez-faire. So, and then later on, Karl Marx reads François Quesnay. He studies Quesnay, of course also other economists, he studied others, but also Quesnay, and Marx's ideas come back to China, right? And then people think, oh, this idea of the total man, the fully cultured human being, which is enabled, which has enough income to cultivate himself, this is kind of close to our Changre, to our Confucian idea of the cultivated person. This idea, there are so many resemblances, and it comes back to China, and then we have a next cycle. And if you look back at history, it's not just that, it's all cycling, it's all exchanges.
The world is,
people who think that their tradition is completely original, they are always wrong. If you just have to go back, you just have to go back far enough. Like for example, in Europe, some people say, "Oh, our culture is original, and we don't want to be together with so many others." But if you look back far enough, you will see, oh, there are so many Arabic words. There's all these Greek words. The Greeks learned from the Persians. We have Chinese words in our German language, for example. We say typhoon and tea and a lot of words.
And trace back humanity. We all come from Africa, right?
Yes.
So this is the way we look back, where actually everybody's connected. It's a whole
we're one flock. We're one
exactly,
group.
Exactly. But over billions years, we develop our own habit and culture.
Millions,
but this is
millions.
the time, millions of years. Exactly.
I think China's Belt and Road to Africa is just reconnecting everybody, right?
Exactly. I was visiting Africa. They love Chinese people. They were like, wow, you're our cousins. Because during the 80s and 70s, we helped Africa a lot.
My cousins, a lot of them are African Americans.
For me, 12 socialist volumes, they are from tradition and also from the world. Because for me, I think it's the first time when we talk the tradition, Confucianism, it's very abstract. You don't, now you say, 有朋自远方来，不亦乐乎. Now it's the value of socialist volume. 友谊.
天长地久.
友谊 just about friendship.
Friendship.
Well, yeah, we are talking about friendship. So it's the first time clarified some volumes, details, so it be clear for the people to defend. What about tradition? What about volumes? What of the real now global situations we live in a different period, globalization, and also we can also learn from some volumes from the world, different civilization. So it's great. People can at least can say the freedom, justice, friendship, prosperity. What we do can be,
and also I think
contemporary explications. Maybe.
To keep up our traditions, I also think it's important to learn from others. My experience when I wrote the book about Wang Yaming and a German philosopher called Nicholas Cusanus was when I studied these writings of Wang Yaming, and I was really thinking also about the differences. I embraced the differences. Differences are not bad. Differences are good because they enable us to learn something new. And then I also, by studying Wang Yaming, I also learned more about my own culture.
So it's now socialist volume is freedom.
And of course,
Wang Yaming is freedom.
Of course, and also, I mean, democracy is one of them. We have to learn now there are many forms of democracies. There's not just one.
Right.
Ancient China had forms. Mingzhu comes from Zhou dynasty, to be found in the ancient book Zhou Li. That's a socialist society describing a socialist community, but it's a different form of democracy. Today we have meritocratic principles. But this can also be something to be learned from other countries.
I think
right?
communicating.
To communicate.
Exactly.
If all
you look
Chinese
at this group
have
of
to
people.
speak English and
Yeah.
communicate with the world,
Right.
I know you're going through this no speaking English thing, but I think it's important we communicate because the world misunderstands still.
Right.
They think Chinese men do kung fu and women are all Susie Wongs. I mean, they need to communicate with China. Chinese need to communicate
It's the
with
first time in history that Chinese people communicate their own civilization to others.
Oh, really? Is
Yes,
the first time?
First time
Yes.
in the Age of Enlightenment, it was Europeans telling the Europeans about China.
Yes.
Now it is Chinese people
It's
have
true.
to do it.
Through art, through music, through dance, through historical narratives, we're also going to be telling the world about China now on CGTN. But first, we're going to have a very short break. China Reform and Opening, 40 years in perspective and trying to understand the values that make China today by looking at the past and projecting into the future. And one of the misinterpretations outside the world today is that all Chinese are rich and everybody's trying to chase after money and they've forgotten about their values. But unfortunately, there's some situations that give that impression. Xinmeng, could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I think through that worshipping money too much, I think Chinese people, especially young people, they are a little bit lost in terms of what they really want for their personal life. Because, this lady, Ma Nuo, so she says on a TV dating show that she would rather cry in a BMW rather than smile on a bicycle. I'm sure you guys have also heard of that. So a lot of people believe that she was not only speaking for herself. She's also representing her opinion, is also representing the Chinese young people because they've grown up in a society that is developing so fast, it's quickly accumulating the wealth that they are doing this. They are worshiping cars, money, houses because the highly developing society made them to do so. And you know that China is soon to pass U.S. as the top market for luxury brands. But do you know that there are over half of the consumers, they're earning salaries below $2,000 per month, so they're not rich at all. They want those bags and clothes to prove their identity and actually social status.
You know, because this is the impression that's been given to the outside world, I think not enough is being done to rebalance that. But today we have two people, Flora and Chunglin, who set up a foundation and doing an enormous amount, not only for charity, but they're also driving education to sort of reinstate values that are far more balanced than what was just represented. Could you tell us a little bit about your charity, your organization, your foundation?
Well, I started at 15 years ago in Hong Kong because we're from South America. We come from a very, very poor village and all with blacks and West Indians. And we immigrated because there was a big thing, the Jim Jones suicidal history, and we have to leave. And my family went some to Indonesia. That's why I've become an Indonesian princess, which is definitely nothing to do with me. But it's like my relatives, and I went to England. But it's always knocking on the British door, like, oh, I went to the Royal Ballet, but it seems really great. But what am I going to do? I came back because I feel like 15 years, I want to develop traditional classical dance in China. But I then realized, oh, but there's so much more to learn about Chinese martial arts and Chinese dance. So now I'm doing a research paper with Dr. Johan to talk about how we merge the energies of repeated movements, yet it's martial arts, bagua, and classical ballet, and modern contemporary, all this Cunningham, all this Merce Cunningham. It has to be something new for this future of China. So therefore, I feel like my charity, I need to operate in China. And I talked to Janine. I said, I'm from Hong Kong. I can't get a license to be a charitable foundation. And we want to give scholarships to orphans, underprivileged. And we are looking after 150 kids every day for free, training, scholarship to do stage productions. So I said, why don't you do something and we can all do it together. You do singing, you do opera, and you do visual arts, you do electronic media. So we got it 3 years ago. We got this license. That I think is really important for us to be here to groom, enable the next generation.
Flora and I, we became friends maybe 15 years ago. And we really understand each other because I went to the West. I've seen the world. And I was 13 when I started my rock and roll and pop. I was the pioneer. Sounds like funny, but it's true, right? So we have a very similar background. Flora was the same. She was the very first young girl went to the Royal Ballet, the Chinese. So we have a lot of similarity in the background. At the same time, we both were very young, experienced fame and the material means. So, but we understand earlier that that's not the whole goal. The ultimate goal is not just chase money, because we had it when we were very young. Yeah. So as we became older, and I was doing my own charity work. I've been helping a lot of orphans and doing charity works. But we both came together 3 years ago with other friends, Amy and other few friends. We just said, you know what? It's time for us to bring the entrepreneurs who are successful in the business world and artists come together, make a platform, and they can talk to each other. Because a lot of time, I've seen my friends give money to I don't think they use it very well, to the wrong hands. They make movies and make things that's meaningless. You can't touch the heart. So what we wanted to is that the artists really can talk to the entrepreneurs and who wants to help, to develop, to raise the next generation. So this is what we start with. And also because of, we know really is how you influence the younger generation. I really admired Flora because she was so young and she experienced a lot of things. And me too. I was very young, but also I know that when I started the music, there weren't a lot of money. We didn't put a lot of money to make a song or movie. I made a movie as well. The movie won a Berlin Silver Bear movie, award. But at the same time, I think it's very important for us to talk to the world and to really influence the next generation. Let them experience music and experience dance, and the happiness is not only from what you have possessed. When you have a car, more clothes, but you need to experience that. So, but also it's so important for us to experience that before, to tell them and to really offer them a chance to experience the happiness come from inside, which is, I think, the different art form, like dance, movie, and music can really inspire people. That I have, guys like Xindong's age, 50s and 60s and 40s, and they're all over the world. So when I'm going to, I was in Japan, I was in the US, when I was performing, and they said, you know what, at that time, and China just opened the door 40 years ago, there weren't entrepreneurs, but there were music and movies and novels that really inspire our hearts and stay with us forever. I don't think any other business can do that, can plant a seed in your heart. So this is how important, as an artist, to really plant that seed to the younger generation.
To play more of a assertive role, instead of let business be the vocal of like a lot of financial, 可以说是 philosophy. They bring this driven, all magazines about CEOs and how to go public. But now it's time we have to go public with our own performing arts and visual
values.
Values.
The values is more important than anything else. Because, this is 40 years ago. What about before that? What of a human race before we become, materialism? What the value at that time people were thinking. So this is why we need to go back to our roots and trace our balance, as an original.
You just said something I just want to pick up on. This whole idea of values and because we've been taught 40 years of reform and open years of culture before that.
5,000 years.
But let's look ahead. Not another 5,000 years, but let's look out 40 years. Let's look out the future. What are the future of values in China and the relationship of that future to the rest of the world? I'm just going to go around the room and everybody give me just kind of your, the first thing that comes to your mind. Okay? Speaking Chinese, we'll translate.
是这样，我认为就是 foundation 其实呢，一个你可以教育孩子，或者我自己，你可以成为王，成为圣，圣就是一个 perfect，但是呢，你也可以成为贤，就是成为圣，就是说你可以为地立心，为生民立命，为万事继绝学，但是你的艺术就是说，你可以高到宗教，你也可以高到哲学，但是其实也可以来自你的身边的点点滴滴。我是这么认为。比如说，刚才那个听你们说，其实这个 foundation 这东西，我认为，我们的教育有时候，譬如我讲一个小故事。
那我先把这个翻译一下。So he said, a foundation can add our children, and also ours be perfect to be a better us. And ours can also be very high to the philosophy, but it also goes back into our every aspect of our culture. Right?
我这个故事也是，Eternal。2010年北京考上泰国。美国9所大学钢琴9级班干部，所有的人都以泰国的评，就是你怎么成绩什么，没被美国那个大学所录取，这个政委会衡量录取人才。是什么？李泰学没有被？有个问题就是说。泰国这个问的如何？讨论地方，我们的教育系统。
Okay, so in 2010, the award of the the high school college examination, right? So the champion of that examination. He was rejected by colleges in America. They think it's injustice for him. It's because system, China's education system, didn't improve his the ability to ask questions, to discuss issues, to debate in a group.
刚才谈到一个 value 价值，当初梁武帝对达摩说：“我舍身同泰寺，难道没有功德？”达摩说：“你无以功德。”
你无什么？
你无以功德，你为了功德。
Yeah.
Well, that's a historic story about the end of
对达摩说。
达摩。
The monk from India.
对我3次舍身同泰寺，就是我作为皇帝出家，到庙里做和尚，而且我捐赠了大，我没有功德。达摩说你没有功德。
Basically, the emperor's whole point was, giving all these donations to the monastery, and that's what I get back for. And the great said you don't get nothing back because a choreographer in many ways been a of many trends to come. Plus, what is in China?
I still feel startup has captured the perfect value. I'm from nothing, we're not, we're leaders, just move. I don't own anything. I think Indian is important. I'm from something I give everything expect back. If you you're bound. So I go back from being money on me. Maybe older. They were listening to actually. I give all my never drive a beautiful car anymore. I want to drive secondhand. I want to live just well. I don't make clothes anymore. I don't want to own anything that much. Some things, but I want to give to people that can enable them to do have a least back. Intention is pure ballerinas. They give nothing back.
So you're another. I mean, you found art when they were in their pages in little stores in Leamington. You turn them around, you package them, then they're selling for $2 in Sotheby's in auctions. You have been the area trends or the creative of China's values.
We're late. So the step we made it. Since the last 10 years, more and more contemporary. They offer, give the people to sell, and then they how they to pay housing, to have poor people can go to schools. For example, to 8 earthquake, more than 200 offered the people. Through the Bali auction house, more than 1 yuan renminbi they offer to help people, to be helped. Even now, almost each month, through some kind of charity dinners, the artists they give something to sell, continue to do. For example, I did a donation to the museum. University of Tsinghua last year. It's the kind of just what we can since more than 13 years hard work and benefit the economic reforms. So now we can a little effort each. Maybe we can try to do for the society to to make it better, even to this kind of hope. And I think. Now we can talk about the second most important economic world. It's important for even the artists. We need to learn from others. We should understand better others and sure try to value for and try to be to be understand better. Can do something for the humanity. And protect the church and good values and learn something to try to hold back what we need to effort to human better.
We talked about you inspired with so much. What is their value?
Well, that was the future of this. That future of time is that I can move unity as the future of
we can agree to
I think self we have exactly them, right? And because something or value they feel with your foundation is the art people to believe. Wang talks about self. Self-esteem comes value that are things in the right. This is my own. This I said right. Distinctions. Those simple. Activity has to be used also.
tradition. So Mars out asks questions to the teachers, and
not a question as a problem confusion of Wang Yang very and positions that means that this authorities or they gather in the 19th century creativity played for
and they and he that amount of respect to
去过那个只对一般，这个就是互别土地三环这样一个的在这儿，然后呢就是山背，所以呢就是去尊敬朝话平。Sorry.
Spilled up the mountains from and the stone in can pre
对后很多这个也用 各种这种资源，但是环包括当地的百姓也是非常欢迎有机会大家对。
哦，太好了。So they have mines. They're proper old, but they don't dig for it. In the past, people dig for it, but now with the people are protecting more economy, beautiful, and all the world to go to visit.
And that really becomes the natural, to a happy environment and environment.
Yes.
And the importance, I think that's concept, right? Environment, and of course, well, it's like tree all number. But wind of reform and oak talk 5 years reform and oak